Hello, I'm Joseph May, Mission Director here at St. Francis Medical Center and Richmond Community Hospital for Bond Secure Mercy Health in the Richmond market. Now, I just want to take the time to briefly go over leadership. And what I mean by leadership, we want to look and do a deep dive into what it takes to be a leader, especially in this day and age. We're going to look at characteristics of a leader in three separate modules. Today's module has to do with shepherding and serving as a leader. So let's look at a definition of what leadership is. Leaders have a distinct responsibility to those they lead and the organization they represent. The concept of leadership is the method a leader chooses to intentionally guide others in the organization to achieve organizational goals. It also can be said that successful leaders intentionally seek out and discover their team's characteristics that will help the organization accomplish organizational goals. So essentially, a leader and someone who's walking in leadership is trying to accomplish the goals set before them, whatever that may be, whether it's an organization, whether it's in the family, whether it's in a department. It could be anything, a religious activity. A leader is trying to accomplish a set goal that is out there and guide people to that goal. Now, the leadership styles we'll cover in this course are the following. All right, we're going to look at servant and shepherd leadership. We're going to look at ethical and moral leadership, as well as toxic and human dignity leadership. Now, for today's module, we're going to focus on servant and shepherd leadership. So here's a little bit of what leadership looks like, just some points to bring out about shepherd leadership and servant leadership. A shepherd leader is someone who's a mentor. In other words, someone who's willing to take the time to grow people. A shepherd leadership, or a shepherd leader, excuse me, is someone who wants to get in this experiential leadership style. Someone who's looking to give those that they're leading the experiences that they need to grow professionally as well as personally. Shepherd leaderships also have some kind of pastoral integrity. This means they're going to be transparent with those that they're leading and guiding. They're going to hold themselves accountable and welcome accountability from others. Now, a servant leader is someone who sees the organizational benefit as the prime target and the prime goal. So they're going to pursue that over their own. A servant leader is also one who gives selfless service, someone who's willing to give of themselves for the betterment of others around them. And lastly, a servant leader is someone who's a role model for all to see and all to know. It is truly important that a servant leader leads by example and not just by words. Now, now let's look at shepherd leadership and servant leadership. Okay, so shepherd leadership is allowing others to lead so they can grow from the leadership experience and prepare them for future leadership roles based on their skills, potentials, strengths, and intrinsic qualities. Now, what we mean by this, let's think about a basketball game, okay? So you have the head coach, and the head coach has players on the floor. The head coach is not going to go out there and play the game of basketball with them. Now, while in practice, the head coach might go out and participate by showing this is what this defense will look like, this is what this offensive set looks like. But when it comes time to play the game, the head coach is going to remain on the sideline. In practice, the head coach is going to simulate certain situations that could happen during the course of a game in order to improve the team quality, in order to prepare the team. The head coach is going to get all the scouting reports and go through them and see what's coming up and see the opponent that they have, and they're going to prepare their team accordingly so they can deal with that. And the head coach is also going to assess, strengths and weaknesses of their team. They're going to put people in certain positions and have them play certain roles for that team, whether it's putting people in a primarily defensive position, whether it's saying you're going to be our shooter and our scorer, you're going to be the rebounder, you're going to play good defense. The head coach makes all these decisions because ultimately the head coach is trying to have the team be successful. But this means analyzing and understanding who needs to do what and where they need to go. So, once again, the shepherd leader, much like the head coach, is not participating. They're not necessarily in the game. They're not necessarily doing all the work for their team. However, they are planning strategically for their team. They are thinking long term results for their team. So they're more of a motivator, a strategizer, And they're going to be someone that is going to be their team's biggest cheerleader, expressing joy and rooting for their team to be successful. Now, when it comes to a servant leader, let's look at this definition for servant leadership. When the leader of a group or organization acts on the behalf and benefit of the organization, willingly sacrificing due privileges that come with the leadership position, with the purpose of helping the organization accomplish set goals, even if there is no direct benefit for the leader, right? So let's look at what is an example of a servant leader, right? So an example of a servant leader in this instance will be you have a manager or supervisor that comes in and takes a shift for one of their employees because they're short staffed, the staff are sick. It could be any reason. And so the manager supervisor willingly performs the duties that is not their responsibility anymore. They perform the duties of the team member who is missing, and they perform their duties as well. A servant leader is looking to get the best result and benefit for the organization to accomplish their goals. And so whatever needs to be done, they're willing to do because what comes first before anything them is the organizational goal. They want to accomplish the mission and vision of the organization. And so they're going to look at their team as well. They're going to be available for their team and give their time for their team because they're here to serve. Right? A servant leader is not necessarily like a shepherd leader. A servant leader is more about being out there with everybody else, whether that's rounding on your team and engaging them and figuring out what they're doing and helping them do it by actually performing the work, or it could be like a shepherd leader rounding it and engaging your team to figure out what are the barriers that they're going through and then going back and working primarily on those barriers, not doing their job for them, not going out there and taking a shift, but actually coming back and realizing how to make this a little bit easier. Right? So the truth be told, we go back and forth between servant leadership and shepherd leadership. If I go out around on my employees, or my associates, excuse me, I'm just engaging to find out what barriers exist and how can we help. I'm not going out to do the work. I'm coming back to strategize and plan to make it easier. If I'm going out as a servant leader, then I might say, hey, listen, you look stressed. I want you to take the rest of the day off, and I'm going to take your position here and I'm going to do it for you. Go ahead and go. Right? So we go back and forth. Back and forth. And a servant leader is going to make themselves more available to their staff to help them through almost anything. A shepherd leader is going to have a little more structure in that matter. Now, as we go on, we're going to focus right here at this moment just primarily on shepherd leadership, right? Now, I want you to take a moment and just reflect on this statement here. And I want you to take the time to think to yourself, how does this look like shepherd leadership to me in this statement? All right, let's look at shepherd leadership. Two things that stick out about shepherd leadership are engagement and forward thinking. This is what I mean by being engaged. Shepherd leaders seek to engage their team where they are to get them where they need to be. Now, what do we mean by that? A shepherd leader is going to take the time to see and understand their staff and their associates and their team. They're going to spend time talking with them. They're going to ask about certain barriers that they have. They're going to want to know about what is something that's difficult for you to overcome or deal with. They're looking at how they can make a process better in order to alleviate unneeded stress for their associates. They're going to do some leadership development training, career module preparation. They're going to make sure that their team has everything they need in order to be successful as a professional and as a future leader. So a shepherd leader is really engaging with their team and seeing their strengths and their weaknesses and areas opportunities to grow them as individuals professionally so they one day can step into a leadership role, right? So shepherd leadership is really, like it's kind of said, forward thinking. Right? Now, another way shepherd leaders engage, shepherd leaders focus on engaging their team from the bottom up to create ownership and from the top down to maintain the proper direction. Now, what do we mean by that from the bottom up and from the top down? When we say from the bottom up, a shepherd leader is going to go and ask their team for specifics. They want to know what's going on and what are some difficulties they're having. They want to know how certain processes are working. They want to know not just share the KPI or the key performance indicator. They want to know what does a team truly see as something that should be a key performance indicator, and how can the team accomplish it. They're going to give that ownership. They're also going to come from the top down to make sure that our focus is where it needs to be. So a shepherd leader is going to have maybe a KPI um, that the team has developed, but that KPI is going to be directly related to the overall KPI of the organization. So they're going to make sure it still links up. So, and they're going to provide good direction and clarity in order to accomplish this KPI and continually push the organizational goals first. Right now, shepherd leaders are seeking to put people in the proper role and give them the resources needed to fulfill the organizational mission. In other words, a shepherd leader understands that just because you may be talented in the area doesn't mean that's where you should be at, right? The shepherd leader is looking to put people in on their team in certain places for the organizational's benefit. Right? So they're not seeking to make someone happy by promoting them. They're not seeking to just hire people and have all their FTEs filled. They're seeking the right people for the positions they have out there. They're thinking beyond just technical skill. They're thinking about the person's character. They're thinking about the benefit of the person working here and the mission, the vision of the organization. They're trying to make sure certain things line up, right? Because a shepherd leader has to accomplish that organizational mission. And the only way to do that is have the right people in the right places. Right? Now, when we come to forward thinking as a shepherd leaders set achievable and profitable goals for their team to inspire self-efficacy, right? And measured by organizational success and profit. In other words, a shepherd leader is not going to create a goal that is unachievable. They're there to create goals that the team can actually achieve, and they can profit. They can profit or be a benefit to the organization. Now, when a team is winning and accomplishing their goals, hitting KPI markers and all those good things and lead measures, that breeds success, and there's a sense of joy. So a shepherd leader is always thinking, how can I inspire my team to accomplish goals? A shepherd leader is thinking, what goals are achievable right now for my team? How can we start with some little success to build to big successes? Shepherd leaders practice introspection to better understand and fine tune their processes for the betterment of their team. Remember, a shepherd leader is going to ask, hey, can I remove barriers? A shepherd leader might send a survey to their team that is asking them, how am I doing as a leader? A shepherd leader is receiving and looking for feedback in order to be a better leader to make sure their team has a leader that they need. So a shepherd leader is going to always review how they're doing and what they're doing. They're going to be open to feedback from any and everyone, whether it's a peer or one of their associates. Now, shepherd leaders practice self-awareness, self-regulation, self-motivation, social awareness, and social skills to properly develop their team cohesion. So when we say self-awareness, a shepherd leader is aware of the impact that they have on other people. They are duly aware of it because they see how their impact on people, whether positive or negative, affects the organizational goal, right? A shepherd leader is also going to practice self-regulation. What we mean by self-regulation, what we're saying is a shepherd leader not only is aware of how they're impacting their team, they're also going to manage their own emotions and their behaviors to make sure there's a positive impact to their team. So even if a shepherd leader is aggravated, they're going to try to deal with it accordingly. In other words, they're going to be professional as much as they can as at all times as possible, because they're understanding how they handle a situation is how their staff is going to respond to it. A shepherd leader is also going to have some self-motivation. So they're going to motivate themselves to accomplish a goal and a task. They're going to be self-starters and almost entrepreneurial because they realize that their team is dependent on them to lead and give some guidance and give some forward planning, right? So they're going to be motivated at all times to improve themselves. Um, a shepherd leader also has social awareness, remember, and it's understanding how the team's emotions impact the team overall. It's understanding how there could be some tension, how there can be some joys that the teams likes to share together, how people interact. They're looking at people on shifts and how they work well together. Is there cohesion? Is there not cohesion? And the shepherd leader is going to address that. And the shepherd leader also will have these social skills. In other words, the shepherd leader is going to see, they're going to understand the people that work for them, that help them in this ministry. They're going to walk alongside them and they're going to see the impact these people have for the organization. And they're going to try to understand their culture. They're going to try to understand their identity. But we'll get into that a little bit later on in a couple more modules. Now, all this is done as a shepherd leader to develop team cohesion, which is truly, truly, truly important. Team cohesion matters. All right, now it's time for a scenario. So let me introduce the team. There's Maya, the director. There's Deshaun, the manager. There's Susan, the team lead, and Amir, the frontline worker. Here's the scenario. As a director of operations, Mia has a standing monthly meeting with Deshaun, manager of patient care, to discuss issues and concerns in patient care. Deshaun says the team is doing well, though he has some concern about Amir's performance as of late. Deshaun tells Mia, Amir takes too many breaks during the day, specifically around 12:20 and 3:02. Susan, Amir's team lead, has stated that the patient access team is frustrated with the frequent breaks. Now, Susan is unsure of how to handle the situation and came to Deshaun for advice. Mia asked Deshaun, what is his advice for Susan? Deshaun states he is unsure of what to do and is considering writing Amir up the next time he is late for a break. Now, here are two questions I want you to consider. How can Mia be a good shepherd leader in this moment? And lastly, what would you do? So at this moment, I want you to press pause on this presentation. Take your time, think these questions through, and then when you finish, press play and we'll get to it. All right. So what we're going to do now is give you what happened next. Mia encourages Deshaun to look at the situation differently and asks, has he or Susan talked with Amir about why he does not return from the breaks on time? Deshaun admits that he has not. Mia encourages him to start there and see what he learns. Mia encourages Deshaun to cautiously consider how to approach the situation in a non-accusatory fashion. Now, Deshaun speaks with Susan and Amir to inquire if there is a disconnect with Amir in returning from break in a timely fashion. Amir informs them that as a practicing Muslim, he prays 5 times a day, specifically at 12:23 p.m. and 3:08 p.m. Deshaun and Mia said they understand and look for a way to work with Amir to ensure he gets a chance to pray every day. Now, Mia follows up later with Deshaun to find out what was the outcome. Deshaun informs her that he, Susan, and Amir work together to create a schedule that allots time for prayer. Mia uses this as a learning experience. Mia asks Deshaun to consider the outcome if he had discipline without the conversation. Deshaun understands without the conversation he would have a serious problem on his hands. So I want you to look at how this kind of unfolded, right? We're going to see some key points that happen here. One, Mia encourages Deshaun to look at the situation differently to find out more information. In other words, Mia wants Deshaun to grow in this. So she wants Deshaun to have some introspection into what is happening. In other words, Deshaun needs to look at why he's making these decisions and really consider from a different point of view. Find out, get some more information, and make a better decision. Mia encourages Deshaun to cautiously consider how to approach the situation in a non-accusatory fashion. Now, once again, Mia isn't doing any of this for Deshaun. She's encouraging Deshaun to do it, and she's going to watch, in the sense from a sideline point of view, Deshaun handle the situation. Now, Mia follows up later with Deshaun to find out what was the outcome, right? In other words, Mia wants to make sure that this turned out the way it's supposed to, or the way it needs to be on Deshaun's behalf and for the benefit of Amir. Now remember, the organizational goals are there. We need people who are going on break to come back. But Mia's trying to understand, hey, did this work out the way that you intended it? Did this come out to a positive outcome? Because listen, shepherd leaders are looking for a positive outcome as much as possible. Not positive outcome to the sense of it that deters the organizational goals, but positive outcome is that we continue to respect people and their human dignity. Now, Mia used this as a learning experience. In other words, Tashawn is growing from this experience. So Mia is not only thinking about Sean today, she was forward thinking about Sean as a leader down the line. And Mia asked Tashawn to consider the outcome if he had discipline without the conversation. In other words, take the time to pause and consider what needed to be done and what would have been the outcome if you did it the opposite way. Mia is showing that she is a shepherd leader. All right, now let's look at the next slide. Let's talk about servant leadership and what it means. Now, I want you to take the time to pause and think about this quote and think to yourself, how does this exhibit servant leadership? So please, just like the last one, press pause on this and just reflect on this for a moment. Servant leadership. There are two key things we want to pull out of it. A servant leader is a developer, and a servant leader is looking for purpose. Right? So when we say developer, a servant leader does not seek to solve every issue a team member runs into. They allow the stressor to build self-efficacy and confidence. In other words, a servant leader is going to walk with you and be with you in the midst of the struggle, side by side, but they're not necessarily going to intervene. They're going to allow that stressor to build you up and build your confidence. Because a servant leader understands that an individual can really grow if they're allowed that room of stress, of uncertainty, to figure out how to solve the problem. So that's how they develop self-efficacy and confidence, by allowing their constituents or their associates to grow themselves in the midst of that struggle. Now, servant leader also develops, creates, and maintains a sense of community for the betterment and success of the team. In other words, a servant leader is looking to bring the team together to have some good cohesion. Right, they're trying to make a community, a group that can rely on each other and can be united for a common purpose and a common goal. A group that is going to not just look at the organization's KPIs, but they're going to look at how their KPIs can be used to better the organization, help them meet that goal. They're going to make that kind of a community within them. A servant leader also develops a sense of ownership, persistence, and commitment in their team as a formula of success. So a servant leader is looking. The reason why they're building from that, from the bottom up and really getting in their team and really helping them, is because they want to make sure their team owns the process. That their team not necessarily takes it personal if the KPI is not accomplished, but their team takes that ownership and takes that personal accountability to come together as a community, once again, unite for a common goal and accomplish that KPI. They're building that persistence in their team. So they're constantly walking with their team, and their team is determined to be consistent and committed to the goal. In other words, they are not going to walk away. They're going to have some resilience, because this has been a proven formula of success. Now, a servant leader also seeks out purpose, right? They seek to fulfill a purpose in life through a role, not obtain a title for a role. And what this means is very simple. A servant leader does not see their title as something to behold. They see it as a personal responsibility to their associates and accountability to their leader. Right? Now, if they were just looking to obtain a title for a role, they would just want to get all the accolades that the role brings with it and the title. Right? So in other words, if I was the manager over patient care in the previous example, I only wanted to get that position so I can have I can occur more PTO or take more time off when I wanted to. So I can have I can have more leeway with things. That's why I would take the role. But I'm a servant leader. I'm fulfilling that role because I see a need that needs to be fulfilled. Remember, purpose. A servant leader resolves to speak truth, do what is right and just to prevent others from experiencing pointless harm. In other words, a servant leader is is going to be speaking the truth in love with great compassion. A servant leader is going to be an advocate for justice and what is right. When they see something wrong, they're going to step in there and do something about the wrong that they've seen. So a servant leader just won't necessarily walk away and go tell their leader. A servant leader is going to get into that situation and to the best of their ability try to help solve or resolve or bring justice to the situation, because the servant leader does not want to see people experience undue harm or undue loss when it can be prevented if we just take the proper action. A servant leader lastly keeps their team focused on the purpose of the mission and not merely the benefits that come with success. In other words, a servant leader is not just going to talk about that we accomplished our KPI and be excited, though they will be. A servant leader is going to tie that KPI back to the mission and why we're doing it. In other words, a servant leader is more excited that we're doing and completing the mission than the benefits or the bonuses or whatever may come from doing the mission. A servant leader's focus is always on the mission of the organization. All right, let me introduce you to your team. Alex is the director. Aisha is the manager. Cameron is a team leader. And Yidi is the frontline worker. Now, as a director of clinical service, Alex is over various clinical teams. His ED team is struggling with patient safety. Alex met with Aisha, the ED manager, to discuss setting up a WIG, our wildly important goal, meeting with her team to develop a WIG, lead measures, and lag measures. The ED team of Alex, Aisha, Cameron, and Yidi met for 20 minutes to develop a WIG of 75% decrease in patient harm in the next 3 months, a lead measure of properly assessment of level of care and trauma, and a lag measure of 15 minutes assessment conversational handoff between the nurse and the doctor that covers patient medical history, current trauma, and observations. Aisha is tagged with tracking the data for the WIG. Cameron is tasked with overseeing the lead measure, and Yidi is tasked with overseeing the lag measure. Now, all agree. However, Alex notices that Cameron and Yidi look uncomfortable with the outcome of the meeting, while Aisha appears comfortable with the outcome. Now, here are two questions for you. How can Alex be a good servant leader in this moment, and what would you do? So please take a moment, pause this presentation, read over the scenario again, and ask these two questions to yourself and write the answers to. All right, let's get into it. Alex gently but confidently asks, what are the concerns Cameron and Yidi have? Yidi expresses she has more experience than Cameron when it comes to gathering data and training nurses how to properly assess levels of trauma and care. Cameron agrees and says that though he is well versed in this area, Yidi is more equipped to oversee it and bring about success. Cameron will happily defer to Yidi as she is a subject matter expert. Now, Aisha interjects and states that Cameron needs the experience if he desires to be a leader. Alex intervenes and asks, which is the most urgent need now? Cameron gaining experience or patient safety? All agree patient safety. Alex then asks, what is a happy medium that will not risk patient safety? Aisha states that Cameron could oversee the lag measure while being mentored by Yidi in the lead measure. All agree to this, and the meeting is concluded. Here's some things that stand out for servant leadership examples. One, Alex gently but confidently asks what are the concerns Cameron and Yidi have. In other words, Alex notices there's something in the community that doesn't look like we're all united for a common goal. So he's going to peer into there, try to figure that out. Two, Alex intervenes and asks, which is the most urgent need now? Cameron gaining experience or patient safety? In other words, once again, Alex is trying to get to the root cause for the betterment of his team so they can have good team cohesion and also allowing some growth. Alex asks what is the happy medium that will not risk patient safety. Remember, Alex is keeping the goal in his forefront of the mind, but at the same time, he's trying to position people to get the help they need. And how does he do this? Well, it's the fourth one we notice. Aisha states that Cameron can oversee the lag measure while being mentored by Yevie in the lead measure. In other words, Alex isn't letting anyone, as well as Aisha, run away from this. Alex and Aisha are working together now at this point to make sure that Cameron grows as an individual, but also the team is united and they can work together. So here's a summary of everything. Leaders need to adapt to discern what type of leadership is needed. Both leadership style and both leadership styles are beneficial and have their proper place. Now, leaders discern which mode of leadership is appropriate to use, and developing those skills are critical and I would say possible. All right, listen, hey, thank you for taking the time to read and go through this module and do the work. Now, I'm just going to ask that you would go ahead and go to module 2 in our leadership presentation.